to the government. I'm delighted to say that we're joined by the Defence Secretary John Healey. He joins us live from Derby at a Rolls-Royce factory. And Defence Secretary, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. We'll get to Rolls-Royce and your announcement in a moment. But firstly, I just wanted to pick up with you on the Axel Ruder-Cabana sentencing. And it's led to a lot of people suggesting perhaps he should have got more. Did it make you pause to consider whether capital punishment should be back on the agenda in the United Kingdom?
Well, first, I think this is a day of shock for us all as we heard the details in the court and the sentencing yesterday. To be honest, you asked me what I felt. I felt it actually hard to catch my breath when I read about the details and about the unbelievable savagery of this man who killed Bibi and Elsie and Alice, and quite clearly would have killed the other 26 young girls in that dance class if he'd been able to. And that's why the Prime Minister is right to say now nothing is off the table. We need to make any changes that are necessary that mean that we don't just get justice for these victims, but we get the changes that they deserve, and we will deliver that.
Should the law be changed to allow life orders for those so close to the age of 18?
Well, the judge passed a sentence yesterday of 52 years and made it clear that he doesn't think that Ruder-Cabana will ever get out of prison, and I hope that is the case.
I wanted to touch on the Russian ships that have been reportedly in our territorial waters. It led to a submarine having to surface to deter them from going any further. What is the latest on that activity that you can report to us?
Well, I reported that to the House of Commons this week, and I authorised that submarine to surface close to this Russian spy ship to warn them off, and then they turned tail and headed to the Mediterranean. The truth is they've got the right to freedom of navigation to go through our waters, but I wanted to make sure that they understood we know what they're doing. We shadow them every step of the way. And in many ways, it underlines the value and importance of where I am here in Derby, because this is the factory that makes the nuclear reactors that power our submarines. And it's British manufacturing giving us that hard power around the seas to help keep Britain safe.
Yeah, and I want to come to that in just a moment. But there's reports that these Russian ships are monitoring and tracking undersea cables. We've seen undersea cables cut in recent years around the world, around Taiwan, for example, more readily than perhaps in past decades. If Russia did cut an undersea cable that was needed by Britain, would that be an act of war?
This is undoubtedly part of the wider Russian aggression that we're seeing directed to the UK and other Western nations. They're not just Putin's not just waging a land war in Ukraine, and it is part of what makes the responsibility for me as Defence Secretary to make sure that we, with allies, do more to monitor what's going on. And I launched with other nations about a week ago a joint exercise to step up surveillance right across the Baltic down through the English Channel, so that we can track these spy ships, we can test what they're doing, and we can say to Putin that we are watching, and we act together in order to try and protect ourselves together.
In terms of the deal you're announcing today with Rolls-Royce, 8-year deal to continue servicing the engines and reactors in the nuclear submarines, what is new about it? Are they not doing that servicing already?
This is a new single contract. It streamlines 8 separate contracts and actually means over the next 8 years that the taxpayer will pay around about 400 million less. But it's the biggest ever deal that Rolls-Royce has had with the MOD, £9 billion to research, to design, to manufacture, to maintain these nuclear reactors that drive our submarines. It's a boost to British jobs, British business. It's a boost to our nuclear deterrent. There'll be over 1,000 new jobs created here. And it really shows the way that defence is part of the engine for economic growth in this country.
I wonder, Defence Secretary, when you see the US President call so clearly and loudly for NATO members in Europe to spend more on defence, whether you're perhaps the only member of the cabinet around the table with a little bit of a smile on your face. Does it make your job easier when you knock on the door of the Treasury to ask for more funding?
Everyone agrees that we must increase defence spending to deal with the increasing threats that we face. And that's why in the government's first budget last year, we've increased defence spending by £3 billion. And we've got an unprecedented commitment to raise defence spending to 2.5% of what this country produces in our wealth. And we've not done that in Britain since 2010. But that's part of the commitment that we make as a new government. It's part of the recognition of the first duty, and the first duty of any government is to keep the country safe. And it's that sort of commitment that allows me to make this long-term contract with Rolls-Royce to create the jobs and also reinforce our national security.
There's obviously talk of peace negotiations taking place between Ukraine and Russia. One aspect that keeps coming up, and President Zelensky's mentioned it himself, would be the need for peacekeeping forces in Ukraine if a deal is reached. Would UK forces be a part of that on Ukrainian soil?
We're jumping well ahead of where things are at the moment, which is that Russia is relentlessly attacking Ukraine, but taking over 1,500 casualties a day. The Ukrainians have been fighting bravely for nearly 3 years in a war that Putin thought he'd win in a week. Our job, and my job as Defence Secretary, our job as the UK with other countries, is to support the Ukrainians on the battlefield and at any negotiations. But it's for the Ukrainians to decide whether and on what terms they start to talk as well as fight.
But would UK forces be available to be peacekeeping forces in Ukraine if requested?
We will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes on the battlefield. We will stand by Ukraine when they decide to talk. As the Prime Minister said, in any future, we will make sure that Britain plays its full part.
So they potentially would involve British forces on Ukrainian soil?
I'm not going to get ahead of where we are now with hypotheticals, but Britain remains committed. And I'm proud of Britain's leadership on Ukraine under the last government and stepped up under this government. I'm proud of the way that the UK is united on Ukraine, and we're its closest ally in Europe.
Defence Secretary, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.